The pyrotechnics had barely stopped smoking when the confusion started. A man in a plain dark suit was walking across the Madison Square Garden stage toward Ace Frehley, and nobody knew if this was part of Kiss's elaborate theatrical show or some kind of security breach. The band stopped playing mid-song. Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons exchanged bewildered glances. Security personnel rushed from the wings, but then hesitated, uncertain whether to tackle someone who moved with such calm authority in front of 20,000 screaming fans. Ace himself stood frozen behind his silver Space Ace makeup, his smoking Les Paul guitar still in hand, watching this stranger approach with what looked like official documents. The audience's roar faded to confused murmurs, the silence in the arena suddenly oppressive after the explosive energy of "Shock Me." Then the man stopped 3 feet from Ace, and his voice somehow cut through the massive PA system without a microphone. "Mr. Frehley," he said, "I apologize for this interruption, but what I'm about to reveal cannot wait any longer, and the people whose lives you changed wanted the truth to be known." Ace's body language shifted visibly, a tension rippling through his platform boots up through his silver costume. Whatever was about to be revealed, it was clear the Space Ace didn't want it exposed, but it was too late. The man was already opening the folder. To understand what happened on that Madison Square Garden stage in December 1978, you need to understand the contradiction that was Ace Frehley during Kiss's golden era. To the world, he was Space Ace, the cool, mysterious alien guitarist who barely spoke, who let his guitar do the talking, who seemed untouchable behind that silver stardust makeup and those mirrored eyes. But away from the spotlights and the smoke machines and the theatrical explosions, Paul Daniel Frehley from the Bronx carried a weight that nobody in the rock world suspected. He had grown up in a neighborhood where poverty wasn't just an economic condition, but a daily grinding reality that shaped everything. His father had worked multiple jobs. His mother had stretched every dollar until it screamed. Young Paul had watched families around him destroyed not by lack of love, but by the crushing mathematics of not having enough money to survive. He knew what eviction notices looked like. He knew the shame of unpaid bills. He knew how financial desperation could turn good people into broken shadows of themselves. When Kiss exploded into international stardom between 1975 and 1977, when the money started flowing in amounts that seemed almost fictional, Ace experienced something that surprised him. Instead of the pure joy he expected, he felt a strange guilt mixed with his success. Every time he cashed a check, every time he bought another guitar or another car, he thought about the families he had grown up around, the ones still struggling, the ones for whom a few $100s could mean the difference between keeping their home and losing everything. But Ace Frehley wasn't comfortable with traditional charity. He hated the performative nature of celebrity giving, the way famous people would hand over big checks while cameras flashed and reporters took notes. It felt fake to him, like generosity was being used as a publicity tool rather than genuine help. He wanted to do something different, something that would actually change lives without turning into a media spectacle about how generous and wonderful Ace Frehley was. In January 1976, during a particularly grueling Kiss tour that had the band playing nearly 300 shows a year, Ace had a private conversation with Bill Aucoin, Kiss's manager. They were in a hotel room in Detroit at 3 a.m, and Ace was uncharacteristically serious. He asked Bill if there was a way to set up some kind of fund that could help struggling families in the Bronx without anyone knowing he was involved. Bill, initially confused about why one of rock's biggest stars was worried about anonymous charity at 3 a.m., listened as Ace explained his reasoning. He didn't want recognition. He didn't want his name on buildings or programs. He just wanted to help people the way he wished someone had helped his own family when he was young. Bill O'Coin worked with Ace to establish what they privately called the Neighborhood Support Initiative, a program that would provide direct financial assistance to families in the Bronx facing economic crisis. Ace didn't just contribute money from his KISS earnings. He committed to matching every dollar that came in from other sources, ultimately putting in more than $200,000 over 3 years, a massive sum in the mid-1970s. But more importantly, Ace stayed involved in ways that shocked even Bill. Between tours, between recording sessions, between all the madness of being in the biggest rock band in America, Ace would quietly visit the Bronx neighborhoods where he had grown up. He would wear regular clothes, no makeup, no rock star appearance, just Paul Frehley checking in with the community organizers who distributed the funds. He wanted to know which families were being helped. He wanted to understand if the money was making a real difference. He wanted to hear their stories. The fund helped families pay rent when parents lost jobs. It covered medical expenses when children got sick and insurance wasn't enough. It provided emergency assistance when sudden disasters hit families who had no financial cushion to absorb the shock. Every recipient was told the money came from an anonymous donor, that accepting help created no obligation, that they should never try to discover the source. Ace insisted on that last part with an intensity that bordered on paranoia. He didn't want gratitude. He didn't want people in his old neighborhood treating him differently. He just wanted to help. But Ace didn't stop with money. He quietly paid attention through his network of community organizers to which specific families were struggling most desperately. When Maria Rodriguez was about to be evicted with her 3 children because her husband's construction injury had eliminated their only income, Ace made sure the fund covered 6 months of rent and medical bills. When James Wilson's daughter needed special education services the public school system couldn't provide, Ace personally ensured the fund paid for private tutoring. When the Kowalski family lost everything in an apartment fire, Ace arranged for the fund to cover new furniture, clothes, and 3 months of living expenses while they rebuilt their lives. He did all of this through intermediaries, through careful arrangements that kept his identity completely protected, through a level of operational security that seemed excessive even to Bill O'Coin. As word spread through the Bronx about this mysterious fund that seemed to help exactly the families who needed it most, people began speculating about the source. Some thought it was a guilty real estate developer trying to offset gentrification. Others believed it was a Catholic church program funded by wealthy Manhattan donors. A few suspected it might be someone famous from the neighborhood who had made it big, but the list of possibilities was long, and nobody seriously considered that the alien guitar player from KISS was running a secret charity operation from behind his Space Ace makeup. Bill O'Coin and the community organizers who knew the truth grew increasingly uncomfortable with the secrecy as the fund's impact grew. They felt that what Ace was doing deserved recognition, that his example could inspire other wealthy musicians to support their own communities, that keeping it secret was actually preventing a broader conversation about how successful people could give back effectively. Bill tried multiple times to convince Ace to allow some public acknowledgement, even suggesting they could reveal it after a few years had passed. But Ace was adamant with an intensity that surprised everyone. He didn't want credit. He didn't want it to become about him. He didn't want people in the Bronx to feel like they owed him something. He didn't want his bandmates to think he was trying to make himself look better than them. He just wanted to help people, and he believed that the moment his involvement became public, it would ruin everything. The tension reached a breaking point in September 1978 when Bill received a call from one of the community organizers. A family that had been receiving assistance for months was about to lose everything anyway because of an unexpected crisis. The father had been arrested on false charges, legal fees were destroying them, and the mother was desperate. The organizer wanted to know if Ace could authorize a larger emergency payment than normal. Bill contacted Ace, who was in the middle of recording his solo album. Without hesitation, Ace authorized $5,000 immediately, enough to cover the legal fees and keep the family stable. But the organizer said something to Bill that stuck with him. She said the mother had cried when she received the previous assistance, saying she wished she could thank whoever was helping them, because it was the only thing keeping her family from complete destruction. That conversation changed Bill's mind about the secrecy. He believed that Ace's generosity was demonstrating something more important than just helping individual families. It was showing a model of how wealth and success could be used without ego, without publicity machines, without the transactional nature of most celebrity charity. Bill decided that when Kiss played their triumphant homecoming show at Madison Square Garden in December 1978, he would find a way to publicly acknowledge what Ace had done. Ace would hate it. Bill knew that. But Bill believed it was the right thing to do. December 1978. Kiss's Madison Square Garden show was supposed to be a celebration. The band was at the absolute peak of their powers. All four members had just released solo albums on the same day, an unprecedented move that had dominated music headlines. Ace's solo album had shocked everyone by becoming the best-selling of the four, with New York Groove becoming an unexpected hit. The hometown crowd was electric, 20,000 fans screaming for their heroes. The stage was set for one of the most legendary performances in Kiss history. Ace was in the middle of his showcase moment. The guitar solo during Shock Me, smoke pouring around him, his Les Paul wailing through the massive sound system. This was Space Ace at his peak, the cool, mysterious alien guitar hero that millions of fans worshipped. When the man in the suit walked onto the stage, Ace's first thought was that something was wrong, that there was some kind of emergency. The audience's confused silence, the way Paul and Gene had stopped playing, the frozen uncertainty of the moment felt surreal. Then he saw the man's face more clearly and recognized Thomas Chen, one of the primary community organizers who had been distributing the Neighborhood Support Initiative funds. The recognition brought immediate dread. Ace knew instantly why Thomas was there. Bill had warned him this might happen, that there were people who felt his charitable work should be recognized, but Ace had believed Bill would respect his absolute insistence on privacy. Thomas's voice was steady and clear, somehow amplified through the arena's sound system. "Mr. Frehley, I apologize for interrupting this show, but on behalf of 47 families in the Bronx whose lives you saved, I have been authorized to share information that these people desperately want you to know." Ace wanted to walk off stage, wanted to stop this, wanted to do anything to prevent what was about to happen. But he was frozen, trapped by the formality of the moment and the certainty that refusing would create an even bigger scene and more questions. Thomas opened the folder and began reading in a voice that carried emotion despite its formal tone. "For the past 3 years, you have funded and maintained the Neighborhood Support Initiative, donating more than $200,000 of your personal money to help struggling families in your old Bronx neighborhood." The audience gasped, a collective sound of shock and disbelief that rippled through Madison Square Garden. Thomas continued, "This fund has provided emergency assistance to 47 families facing economic disaster, covering rent, medical expenses, legal fees, and other critical needs. You did this with one absolute condition, that your involvement remained completely confidential." Thomas looked up from the document and directly at Ace, whose silver makeup couldn't hide the visible discomfort in his body language. "But Mr. Frehley, these families have voted, and they believe you should know what your generosity actually did." Thomas pulled out letters, actual handwritten letters from the families. "Maria Rodriguez wants you to know that your fund didn't just pay her rent. It saved her children from homelessness and gave her time to find a new job after her husband's injury. She has stable housing now and is supporting her family." The arena was silent. 20,000 people listening with an intensity that felt almost religious. "James Wilson wants you to know that the tutoring you paid for didn't just help his daughter. It changed her entire life trajectory. She's in college now studying to be a teacher." Thomas's voice cracked slightly with emotion. "The Kowalski family wants you to know that when they lost everything in that fire, your assistance didn't just replace their belongings. It showed them that they weren't alone, that someone cared, that they could rebuild." Thomas looked directly at Ace, who was visibly struggling behind his makeup. "You grew up in these neighborhoods. You knew what financial desperation felt like. And when you became successful, you didn't forget. You came back. You helped. You did it without asking for anything in return, without wanting recognition, without making it about yourself." The audience erupted in applause, but Ace didn't acknowledge it. He stood motionless, his Les Paul hanging from his shoulder, clearly upset that his secret had been exposed. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley were staring at him with expressions of genuine surprise. Peter Criss looked emotional. None of them had known. Thomas wasn't finished. He pulled out another document. "Additionally, Mr. Frehley, there's something you don't know. When word of your fund spread through community networks, other successful people from the Bronx were inspired to create similar programs. In the past year alone, more than $100,000 in additional funding has been donated to neighborhood assistance programs, all inspired by your example." Ace's body language showed genuine shock. Behind the silver makeup, his expression revealed that he had no idea his private charity had inspired others. Thomas had one final revelation. "You helped 47 families directly, but your example helped hundreds more. You showed that success doesn't have to mean forgetting where you came from, that wealth can be used without ego, that the measure of a person is what they do when nobody's watching." The standing ovation lasted several minutes, but Ace remained frozen, clearly struggling with the exposure of something he had protected so carefully. The revelation of Ace's secret charity work made headlines across America the next day, competing with coverage of Kiss's spectacular show. The story wasn't just about the money, though $200,000 was a significant sum in 1978. It was about the principle of anonymous generosity, about using success to help others without demanding recognition, about remembering where you came from and giving back without making it a publicity stunt. Community organizations across New York received hundreds of calls from wealthy individuals asking how they could establish similar programs. The concept of anonymous neighborhood assistance funds spread to other cities, creating a quiet revolution in how some successful people approached charitable giving. For Ace, the exposure of his secret charity was deeply uncomfortable. He gave only one interview about it, telling a reporter, "I didn't do anything special. I had money I didn't need, and I saw people who were struggling like my family struggled when I was a kid. It seemed wrong not to help. I don't understand why that's worth celebrating." He refused to discuss it further and became visibly annoyed when journalists tried to push the topic during press conferences. His bandmates reacted with surprising respect. Gene Simmons, known for his business-focused approach to everything, publicly said he was impressed by how Ace had helped people without turning it into a business opportunity or publicity move. Paul Stanley said Ace's charity made him think differently about what success should mean. Maria Rodriguez, whose family's near eviction had been one of the first cases the fund addressed, later said in a newspaper interview that Ace's help had saved more than her housing situation. The financial assistance had removed a crushing pressure that was destroying her family's mental health, giving them space to breathe and rebuild their lives. When she learned that the Space Ace was the source, she tried multiple times to thank him personally. Ace finally agreed to meet her, but only privately, away from cameras and reporters. What was said between them remains private, but Maria told her family that Ace had asked about her children, wanted to know if they were doing okay in school, seemed genuinely more interested in their well-being than in receiving gratitude. The story of Ace's Neighborhood Assistance Fund became a reference point in discussions about authentic generosity versus performative celebrity charity. In an era increasingly focused on publicity-driven philanthropy, where charitable giving is often as much about brand management and tax benefits as actual help, Ace's insistence on complete anonymity felt revolutionary. He didn't want credit, didn't want buildings named after him, didn't want his generosity to be transactional or image-enhancing. He just wanted to help people who needed it. And he wanted his help to come without the complicated dynamics of owing gratitude to someone famous and powerful. The neighborhood assistance programs inspired by Ace's fund continue today in various forms, having helped thousands of families over the past 4 decades. Every time a community organization provides emergency assistance, every time anonymous donors support struggling families, there's a connection back to that night at Madison Square Garden when a community organizer walked on stage and exposed a secret that Ace had desperately wanted to keep. The irony is that by trying to help quietly, Ace created a model of generosity that inspired more giving than any publicity campaign could have achieved. His example showed that meaningful charity doesn't demand recognition, that true generosity can be silent, that using your resources to help others is its own reward. Ace Frehley played guitar in the biggest rock band in the world. He was Space Ace, the cool alien guitarist that millions of fans idolized. But he was also Paul Frehley from the Bronx, who never forgot what it felt like to struggle, who used his success to help others without asking for anything in return, who demonstrated that the measure of a person isn't found in what they do when everyone's watching, but in what they do when they think nobody will ever know. That's the legacy that endures beyond the platinum albums and sold-out arenas. The example of a man who could have demanded recognition for his generosity, but instead chose to help others while refusing credit for doing so. The Space Ace was also quietly and secretly a hero of compassion, and that might be his most important solo performance of all.